Welcome back to our DAN education series, specifically where we're talking about the heart, health and diving. We're in chapter 6, and in this edition we're going to be talking about pulmonary embolism. The previous section was about deep venous thrombosis. Now we're going to be talking about what happens if the clot ends up in the lungs. Keep watching. Pulmonary embolism is an obstruction that lodges in the blood vessels or vasculature of the pulmonary system. It may be air, fat, or a blood clot, also called a thrombus. If pulmonary embolism is caused by a thrombus, the clot typically originates from the deep veins of the leg, known as deep venous thrombosis, of which we discussed the details in the previous section. The resulting obstruction of flow in the lungs typically causes a drop in cardiac output and a significant drop in blood pressure. The onset of pulmonary embolism can be acute or chronic. In the case of acute pulmonary embolism, the symptoms are evident to the individual, whereas chronic onset may reveal its presence only very subtly and even go unnoticed by the individual. Untreated pulmonary embolism has a high mortality rate. An especially grim prognosis applies to individuals who have a concurrent serious deep venous thrombosis or a right ventricular thrombus, right ventricular dysfunction, or other additional factors affecting the effectiveness of their heart function. An estimated 1.5% of all deaths are diagnosed as being due to pulmonary embolism. Risk factors for DVT and therefore pulmonary embolism include recent surgery, stroke, the diagnosis of autoimmune disease, malignancy or heart disease, obesity, smoking, hypertension, and previous DVT, as well as extended travel leading to DVT, as we mentioned in the previous episode. Symptoms of pulmonary embolism may include chest pain or breathlessness, also known as dyspnea, pain or swelling in the calf related to the deep venous thrombosis where the clot came from, hypotension or low blood pressure, altered consciousness, and even fainting. Distension of the neck veins in the absence of another condition called a pneumothorax, which is where the lung collapses and may cause buildup of blood or pooling of blood in the neck veins, is one of the signs of a possible pulmonary embolus. Pulmonary embolism should be one of the first conditions considered when attempting to make a diagnosis in someone exhibiting acute symptom onset, with the listed symptoms that we mentioned previously and the associated risk factors. Appropriate diagnostic tests may include the measurement of an individual's levels of a hormone called brain natriuretic peptide, or BNP, which is a protein known as cardiac troponin, as well as a CT angiogram of the lungs. The treatment focuses initially on managing the cardiopulmonary impairments as a result of the pulmonary embolism. Such care may include breathing from an artificial ventilator, fluid management, and the use of anticoagulant medication. Then there's the possibility of trying to remove the blood clot, either through clot busting or an embolectomy, which is where there literally is an attempt to remove the blood clot through one of the large blood vessels. Ultimately, especially if there is a recurrence of deep venous thrombosis and pulmonary embolism, or also where the chances of blood clot release is high, may be fitted with a special filter called a vena cava filter. It is important to know that if a person goes into shock as a result of pulmonary embolism, the mortality is approximately 50%, or half such individuals. In the case of a gas embolism, a person's condition may be expected to improve dramatically under hyperbaric oxygen conditions. The history is very important, and again remember that thromboembolism usually is the result of deep venous thrombosis. So what about the effects on diving? Well, despite medical advances, the 5-year all-cause mortality, in other words death, in individuals who have suffered pulmonary embolism due to underlying risk factors remains over 30%. And pulmonary hypertension, or increased blood pressure on the right side of the heart, adds to the risk because it adds an additional burden and limits exercise capacity. And this may persist in individuals who have had pulmonary embolism even after successful treatment. So the determination of fitness for diving by those who have had a pulmonary embolus must include their lung function, underlying conditions, anticoagulation status, exercise capacity, and cardiac status. Thank you for watching this episode of pulmonary embolism as one of the factors affecting heart, health, and diving. We've got one chapter to go, Chapter 7. Keep watching.